Hello, happy evening. Welcome to your 48th LD virtual town hall. We are joined by Senator Patty Kuderer, Representative Amy Walen, and Representative Vandana Slatter. Thank you so much, legislators, for hopping on. And folks, please go ahead and drop your questions in the chats of any platform that you are watching on tonight. We are ready to take in those questions and have some pre-submitted as well. But before we get to those, I want to give our legislators just a moment to answer some questions here. And so we'll go ahead and pass it off to Senator Kuderer to hear a little bit about what you've done this session, what committees you're involved with, what work you've done, and maybe a little bit about where you're calling in from and bills you're excited about.
All right. Well, thank you. Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to our virtual town hall. Thank you all for joining us to hear a bit about the good work that we got done this last session, but also some of the issues that we're still working on. I'm Senator Patty Kuderer, proud to represent the 48th Legislative District, and I'm joining you from beautiful Bellevue. To give you a little background about myself, I'm a mom, an attorney, and a big advocate for our communities. I'm chair of Housing and Local Government. I vice chair State Government and Elections, and I serve on both Law and Justice and the Rules Committees. This is my 7th session, and it was a short one and intense, but filled with some pretty groundbreaking legislation that we'll be excited to share with you tonight. And as you can imagine, much of my effort is spent on addressing affordable housing and homelessness issues. Washington is not alone in suffering from these issues, and they impact every corner of our state. This is not a blue issue or a red issue or a west issue or an east issue or an urban issue or a rural issue. Homelessness and housing affordability is all of our issues. And I'm thrilled that we invested about $700 million in the ability to build and create and acquire more affordable housing and to help people transition from homelessness into permanent supportive housing facilities. And we know that housing is a social determinant of health. And one bill I was particularly pleased to see get over the finish line was one by a House colleague of mine, Representative Frank Chop. And his bill effectively allows doctors to write a prescription, if you will, for permanent supportive housing services for those qualified patients. And it's one of the many exciting ideas that will reduce the number of people who are suffering from homelessness in our communities. And my committee will be monitoring that implementation of that bill and also of other bills that we've passed in previous sessions as we continue to deal with these urgent issues of housing affordability and homelessness. And I'm thrilled to be here with the rest of the 48th Legislative District delegation, Representatives Slatter and Walen. And I consider myself lucky not just to represent the good people of the 48th Legislative District, but to do so alongside these amazing women. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Slatter.
Thank you, Senator Kuderer. It's an honor to represent this district with you also. My name is Vandana Slatter, and I am coming to you from Bellevue as well. I am a state representative. I was appointed in 2017 and have since been elected since that time. I am chair of the College and Workforce Development Committee. I sit on the Environment and Energy Committee and also the Transportation Committee. My background is that I was trained as a pharmacist, a hospital pharmacist, and I worked as a clinical scientist for many years. I care deeply about innovation and ethical technology, and I also care about government and effective government and how government can actually play a role in helping people achieve their full potential and remove barriers that impact that ability to achieve that potential. I'm also an immigrant and a daughter of immigrants, and I understand what it's like to build a life in a new country, in a new place, and try to find your space and voice in that space. I'm very proud to represent so many people in this district as well, this diverse, dynamic, and a growing district, an innovative, entrepreneurial district. And so I'm very pleased that it's really interesting because I'm chair of the College and Workforce Development Committee, but it's my second year as being chair. So I've had a full term, I guess you could say, which is 2 sessions. And I've never actually managed the committee in person. It's always been virtual. And I just want to say that, it's been really an honor to do the people's work, even through the pandemic, in a virtual session. And, we have to really give credit to our staff and our legislative tech folks and others and legislators and the community for engaging with us in this work. Hundreds of bills passed at 3 big budgets, and we're still continuing to do that work. And in the first year, we were completely virtual. This year, there was a bit of a hybrid model, so people could go down to the floor in Olympia. And it was really great to see that, that even though there's been this big healthcare crisis and economic crisis, that we still got some work done. I know people are worried and feeling, I call it the big awkward, or at least I think it's been called the big awkward, sort of opening up into the community with, do you mask, do you not mask, how often do you go in person? And I'd say we're all experiencing that. And I think that that's something that we have to help each other with as well. A bill that I was very excited about seeing passed was a bill, actually 1659, which is a bill that I sponsored, but really would not have been gotten over the finish line without the support of so many students, faculty, as well as business community, labor, and many members of our community. Basically, it is a bill when we know that more students aspire to higher education at any time in any generation, because we know that having a high school diploma isn't always an entry point for a high wage or living wage job. And what we're finding is that 5 times more students who have a safety net or come from wealthy backgrounds are achieving this post-secondary credential, an apprenticeship or a degree. And those who are low income, first generation or rural students, low income students, are falling off the ability to actually achieve that credential because of small costs that are getting in the way of them staying in school. Costs like an extra day of daycare or gas money or groceries, or even $100 to pay the rent. And these are, it's been shown in research that even this small amount of cost can help someone stay in school. So we sponsored a bill to be able to bring those costs, give students some additional bridge grants to help them with these emergency needs, and as well sort of expand the ability for students to stay in school with expanding our financial aid to them. So I'm really proud of the work this legislature has done and the community all coming together to support students during this economic crisis and our workforce development. Again, it's an honor to be here. I hope we can answer more of your questions, and I'd like to pass it on to my intrepid and fabulous seatmate, Representative Amy Walen.
Oh, thank you so much. It's just a privilege to serve with these incredible women. And I honestly believe that the 48th is in good hands with our diversity of experience and where we come from and our lived experience and our areas of subject matter expertise. And we all focus on slightly different areas, but are very passionate about serving the people of the 48th and also everyone in our state. So a lot of people probably watching this already know quite a bit about me, but I'm still going to say that my mother married an Australian man when I was in the 5th grade, and we lived in Australia, and I became an attorney down there. And when I came back to the US, I wasn't able to practice. So I went to work in a car store, and I've been working in the car business ever since. I was encouraged by women in my community to run for the city council in the city of Kirkland, and I served in that role for 9 years and as mayor for 3. That was the privilege of my life, to serve as the mayor of Kirkland. My husband and I own and operate a small business, so I bring that. I do the financial statements. I'm the CFO, so I bring the sort of, some experience in the business world to this job. And I just feel very privileged that you all have chosen me to represent you in Olympia. We take on an enormous amount of subject matter, and you can't be an expert in all of it. So I promise you tonight, if I don't have the answer and my colleagues don't, we'll get back to you. I'm coming from you from a little holiday. I'm on a little holiday. I need to get my hair cut and go to the dentist and all these kinds of things you have to do after the short legislative session and long nights. But thank you so much for being here and paying attention to the work. The work is important. I think the bill that I'm I'm really split between Marcus Riccelli's bill that has to do with getting more kids free lunch and breakfast at school, which was an amazing bill. We funded $40 million for it to leverage federal money and make more kids qualify for meals. And then Rep. Fitzgibbon's fabulous food composting bill, and we'll probably get more into in some of the climate bills that we did. But that is, 1799 is just an incredible piece of work, and I'm excited to talk to you more about it. So thanks.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, Representative Slatter and Senator Kuderer. It is incredible to hear about just the powerful work that you've been doing this session. And just to get into the questions, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off here to my colleague Sam to get started on the Q&A.
Hey, thank you so much, Simran. Thank you. And welcome in again, everyone. We're really excited to be doing our first 2022 virtual town hall with the 28th Legislative District Delegation. Also, we'll plug that before we get into Q&A, feel free to chime in. Feel free to give us your comments and your questions here. We're joined by folks on the Facebook of Representative Slatter, Facebook of Senator Kuderer. We're also on the SDC's main webpage, the HDC's main Facebook page, and a couple of YouTubes in there, as well as a Twitter. So we're joined by people all across the web here wanting to chat with our wonderful delegation. But we've also put out a survey, a poll into our community, which we've seen a lot of support. And so we have some pre-submitted questions that we're going to run through first, and then time permitting, we'll get to as many questions as possible. Okay, so without further ado, one of the questions we kind of saw multiple iterations of through different emails across these different offices was folks were really curious about your committees, and the folks were asking, what have your committees been most hard at work on this session, and what might you be looking forward to working on this next year? And we'll start it off with Senator Kuderer and maybe go down the line.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, I serve on 3 policy committees and then the rules committee. So I'll give you an overview, kind of the 10,000-foot view of each committee. I chair housing and local government, and so we were very hard at work at trying to pass good policy that will increase the inventory of affordable housing and homeownership opportunities throughout the state. And also to expand some additional protections for landlords and tenants. We had a bill that will reimburse landlords for damage done to an apartment by an abuser of a domestic violence victim who has to leave suddenly in order to escape and find safe housing. And we also passed a bill to allow to require landlords to accept non-electronic means of payment as well as electronic means. And that is really to help our families that are on the lower income level, our working families that don't often have access to electronic methods of payment. So those were 2 bills that we passed there. And of course, like I said, increasing the affordable housing. We also did some GMA work to try and help cities, local governments with their comprehensive planning. That work will continue next year, but there was a lot of heavy policy work and lifting done on those areas. In terms of state government and elections, we did look at some very good bills dealing with accessibility in local government meetings and for our folks who have accessibility issues and may not be able to personally appear, whether it's at a local city council meeting or a county council meeting or a state legislative meeting. And so putting some parameters in place to make sure that remains and make sure that our government is open and accessible to all of our citizens of our state. And we also did some work in the election area. We have a great bill out of the House that will make initiatives more accurate in terms of their effect. A lot of times when an initiative is on the ballot, you don't necessarily know what impact that's going to have to the budget. And this bill that passed will require that to be on the ballot as an explanation. So voters will actually know when they vote for an initiative what is impacted and what they're getting for voting for or against the initiative. In terms of law and justice, we did some work on trailer bills dealing with our police reform from last year, our police accountability bills. And we passed some of those, not all of them, but we had some very good and substantive conversations about that. And that is an issue about rebuilding trust in our communities with our law enforcement and making sure that our law enforcement has the appropriate tools it needs to do the job that it needs to do, that they need to do. And we also did some work dealing with cybersecurity and cyber stalking. We have been very focused on helping victims and making sure that they have the resources that they need in order to heal. So those were the main, that's a 10,000 foot level of what we were working on in those committees. And I will pass it off to Representative Slatter.
Thank you. Wow, you did an amazing job, Senator Kuderer, at sort of summarizing really big bills and big committees. Over like around 400 bills are passed. This is a short session, but it sort of felt like a longer session, I think, in the intensity of the work that we had. And many committees have about 20 or 30 bills. So just to give you a bit of perspective on why I think Senator did an amazing job. So I sit on 3 committees. I chair the College and Workforce Development Committee. I sit on the Transportation Committee and the Environment and Energy Committee. So I'll just go over those briefly and try to give you some top line remarks. The College and Workforce Development Committee this year sort of had we are 49th. Washington is 49th in the nation for students who fill out something called the FAFSA. It sounds like this complicated form, but it's kind of the gateway to financial aid for federal financial aid and also state financial aid. And we have a very generous financial aid program in our state. So it's kind of not great that we are so low in filling out the FAFSA. And we think it's because a lot of students don't get to hear about it, or they don't know about it, or maybe there are issues of access to online services and supports or language access. So there was a bill this year by Representative Hansen who provided sort of marketing, outreach, and navigation tools for people to be able to access the FAFSA. So students get access to free financial aid, which helps them to get a living wage job in the future and also to be educated in an area that they're excited about. And that was one leg of a 3-legged stool to support students. The second was the bill I mentioned before. Persisting in school is really important. People are dropping out for very small costs. And so we're trying to bridge that cost and need gap with another bill, the 1659 bill, to help students stay in school and persist, to actually get their degree or credential. A woman, I had met a young woman who was just really impressive, worked in a nonprofit. She's making a decent wage. And she said to me, Vandana, this is a great day because I was able to pay off my $40,000 student loan. And I said, wow, congratulations, that's huge. So what credential did you receive? Where did you go to school? And she says, oh, I never received a degree. I dropped out to be able to help my mom pay for her mortgage. And so there are a lot of students that start in the process, but they don't persist. So that was important. The third leg of the stool is student loan support. So we've created a state student loan, 1% student loan program for most low income students and for high demand degrees, graduate degrees. And that is so that if students do have to take out a loan to stay in school or to complete their cost of attendance, which could be housing or other needs, that they can actually get their degree. And once they get a job, they are not burdened by student loan debt at such a high rate. So those are 3 major policy items for the College and Workforce Development Committee this year. And I'm so grateful to my colleagues and all of the advocates that supported this measure through the process. But a few other interesting things we did. One was we created a centralized apprenticeship structure so that when we want more apprenticeships, maybe in healthcare and other areas, we didn't have a very easy way to do that. So now we've created a centralized structure and form so that you can actually build more apprenticeships. And that's from Senator Kaiser's good work. And apprenticeships don't always get to access the financial aid system, but they have access to it. So now we also have a way from Senator Randall's bill that allows us to do that as well. And one very important heartfelt piece of legislation that got a lot of real emotional testimony was a hazing prevention bill that we had. A family And Bellevue, whose son Sam Martinez died due to a hazing incident, actually has been incredibly strong advocates of hazing prevention and had just been an incredible force to bring such legislation forward that I think will be nationally recognized. And I just really want to thank Representative Levitt, who worked really hard, Representative Sen, and others who worked very hard in bringing this policy forward through our committee. Basically, it expands the definition of hazing, requires each institution of higher education to prohibit hazing, both on and off campus. It creates hazing education and provides, publicly reports actual findings of hazing violations and some other measures. Really powerful, important bill, and it is being called Sam's Law. So we're very proud to pass that through our committee. So in transportation, we had Move Ahead Washington. It was a transportation package that's different than a transportation budget. Basically, it was the result of 2 years of work on transportation needs in our community. Of course, it's $16 billion over 16 years that was not used. Tax was not raised to be able to get these dollars, but basically it's one of the greener transportation packages, supports people versus just infrastructure. And there were 4 major goals. One was to preserve our state's infrastructure. The second was to expand safe and affordable ways to travel around, pedestrian transit, bus rapid transit, special needs transit, and address the harm caused by past transportation policies. There are people in the pandemic that had to cross highways to get to grocery stores. These were developed in the past, and we wanted to be able to find ways to mitigate these harmful practices. And so this transportation budget does that. And also reducing carbon emissions. 40%, 45% of our emissions in our state come from transportation. So we have a lot of investments in that space, and I certainly can go into more detail about that later, but there are definitely some investments in the 48th legislative district that affect and improve our access and movement through not only to work, but predictability, but also preservation and maintenance all around our state. And then in the third committee, that is environment and energy, Washington really can't wait for us to act on climate. And you heard, so it's interesting that transportation is one way to do that. And the Climate Commitment Act was passed last session that basically was a cap and trade. And the dollars from the Climate Commitment Act are also paying for transportation dollars in that Move Ahead package that I spoke about. And as we have a few other bills, appliance efficiency standards, that's one of the faster ways that we can actually get greenhouse gas emission reduction by having more efficient appliances. We have reducing methane emissions from landfills, a great bill by Representative Duer requiring landfills to capture greenhouse gas methane, which is about 100 times more, trapping 100 times more heat than carbon dioxide. You heard Representative Walen speak about 1799 from Representative Fitzgibbon, which basically, our surplus food and organic waste actually has been left to rot in landfills and releases methane into the atmosphere and accelerates our climate crisis. So this bill helps to direct our surplus food and to families who need it, and it repurposes organic waste for composting at local farms. So it's really exciting as well. There are others as well here. I obviously don't want to take up more time, and I feel like Representative Walen has also some really great committees she serves on. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't talk about what committees I serve on. I also serve on rules in the House. I serve on Finance, Consumer Protection and Business, and the Civil Rights and Judiciary Committee, which I asked to be on so we could talk about gun violence, because that's where bills preventing gun violence, those bills go to the Civil Rights and Judiciary Committee. But we also deal with protection orders and guardianship and, issues that affect the most vulnerable among us. I serve on the Lieutenant Governor's Committee that is about international relations and economic development, and I would really encourage folks to take a look at his work. Basically, our economic development challenge, when you do that sort of strengths, weaknesses analysis of our state, our weaknesses are lack of housing supply. So we all know it, we live it every day, but it's our number one it's our number one challenge. And I think coming up, we'll have some questions about housing. Finance, our committee is kind of poised and waiting for the work of the tax structure working group that's been going around the state asking people about what we need to do to reform our tax system. And those strategies will probably be implemented in the 2023 legislative session. So a lot of what we dealt with in finance was about targeted property tax exemptions to create more housing. And we did a little bit of that. It's a revenue raising committee. We need to take on a state tax. We need to take on business and occupation tax. Probably the biggest thing we did for the small business community, which affects about 75% of small businesses and therefore families who are in small businesses in our state, which is raise the filing threshold for business and occupation tax to $125,000 in revenue a year. This is a huge amount of our businesses who will no longer have to file at all. So there's a lot of administrative burdens when you're trying to create your dream business, and that's one of them. In the Civil Rights and Judiciary Committee, we really struggled with some domestic violence issues. We added the term coercive control to domestic violence when it comes to retrieving firearm rights and those kinds of things. And coercive control is something that is kind of a mental manipulation that is used, and often weapons are paired with coercive control to dominate or control the victim of domestic violence. So that was a very important step that we made. We have more work to do. And then, of course, the gun bills. We dealt with ghost guns. We did some more work about ghost guns, these guns that can be printed on a 3D printer and are untraceable. We did Senator Kuderer's bill, and I don't know if it was her version or the House version, but it was a version that prohibits open carry in places where it might intimidate other people who want to show up to school board meetings, city hall, protests, that kind of thing. And the large capacity magazine ban, so anything over 10 bullets in a magazine. And I guess I'd just like to take this opportunity to say that some of us in the 48th have received some really sort of threatening and beyond unpleasant, really frightening emails from folks that are opposed to these sorts of policies. And to me, we can have policy disagreements without resorting to intimidation and threats. And those are kind of what we're trying to target with these firearm regulations. Is these are dangerous objects and we think they should be regulated, and if folks don't think they should be, then that's a policy difference that we have, and it shouldn't come down to sending us emails that are threatening our families, requiring us to have security. And unfortunately, that's the reality of being an elected official in this time. And I will just say, please don't threaten our members. We're honestly trying to do the right thing. And specifically, I think about Senator Kuderer, who's really been the subject of some really terrible things being threatened towards her. So please stop. We take these threats seriously, and we're not going to be bullied or intimidated by doing the right thing. I understand that if you think that the Second Amendment is the only law of the land, and you think that any gun regulation is the camel's nose under the tent, I completely understand that, but nobody in this district wants to take away your guns. We just want reasonable regulations, which, common sense safety precautions that responsible gun owners do anyway. So I'll just take this opportunity to say that. The other committee I'm on is Consumer Protection and Business, and we say there are a lot of technical bills, but they're really not. Consumer protection is, we regulate insurance and banking and making sure that the big players aren't taking advantage of the little players. We did some wonderful things about equitable access to credit this year for historically disadvantaged businesses. We modified some rules for CPAs. We made it easier for people to enter the workforce if they've had a previous conviction. Some really good work goes through that committee. So that's enough for me. I know we have questions and I want to get to those.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for such a powerful testimony on the policy differences. I think that's some welcome relief for all of us. So our next question that we got was pre-submitted from the survey that we sent out, and someone was asking, what do you think the state of Washington and you think cities should be doing to support affordable housing for those with the lowest incomes?
Well, before I start in on that, I want to just say that what you heard from my seatmates is exactly why I'm so proud and honored to serve with them and feel so privileged. It is such a joy to have these two as by my side as we do this work. So I just want to thank you both for what you've said. Getting back to supporting affordable housing, yeah, there's a tension between local government and state government in terms of building what we would like to see more opportunities for affordable housing. There are some cities that are doing it really, really well. I'd like to lift up Kirkland as an example. They do such great work when it comes to ADUs and expanding options and increasing housing inventory and addressing homelessness issues. Have really done a remarkable job. But there are some other communities that really haven't stepped up to the plate. And there are some prohibitions in ordinances that prevent us from leveraging existing infrastructure, which is really the way that we get to build more affordable housing more quickly. And in terms with those with the lowest income, that is definitely one of our biggest challenges. And the Housing Finance Commission, just want to give a shout out to them. They do phenomenal work at helping first-time home buyers get into affordable homes. And their whole focus, some of their programs, I should say, their focus is on those with the lowest incomes and to increase housing ownership through their programs. And they have a down payment program, assistance program, and they have and they work with private developers in terms of building affordable housing and then maintaining it for a minimum of 15 years. And then that's supposed to be transferred over to an affordable housing provider who will maintain the affordability option for those who need it. So we absolutely need more affordable housing. I mean, here on the East Side, we've been watching the prices go up and up and up and up, and it's getting out of reach. And so what that means is we do need to build more. We are right now down about a 250,000 housing units. And we do need, and we're not going to build that overnight. So another thing that we're doing, and we do need, and local government has really stepped up to the plate on this piece, and that is rapid acquisition of buildings, at least for purposes of permanent supportive housing. This will allow us to assist people to transition from living outside into permanent supportive housing facilities. And there they will be given the resources that they need to get their feet back on the ground and get going with their life again. And by that, I mean, mental health counseling, drug addiction counseling, employment services. Having an address is necessary to getting a job. And when we have our permanent supportive housing facilities, what's beautiful about it is that people have an individual address, because this is, for example, purchasing former nursing homes and former hotels and turning them into permanent supportive housing services. And these are very different from the congregate shelter models that we've used in the past. And COVID, if there was a silver lining to COVID, it was that we saw that the congregate shelter model had limited use and limited efficacy. We really needed to move toward more of this model where you could lock a door, put your head on a pillow, not have to leave during the day, so you could actually access the services that were being provided. They would be right there in the building, so you don't have to travel someplace to go get them, and really help you get your life back on track. Some of the comments that we heard from people who are able to get into a permanent supportive housing facility, we heard things like, I felt human again. I was able to, feel worth in who I was again, and want to get back and want to take care of the issues, the personal issues that I had, et cetera. It was really quite moving. And the proof is in the data. And the data tells us that this is a very successful model, and it's something that we need to be moving more toward. I'm happy to say there's one in my backyard, a permanent supportive housing service, and feel very fortunate that Bellevue is just doing such great work in that regard. And so is Redmond and Kirkland, for that matter. So we're very fortunate that we have very caring cities, but we do need to I guess, remove obstacles so that we can build more and leverage the existing infrastructure that we have so that we can really tackle this problem.
And if you don't mind me jumping in here, I would love to. There were a couple of controversial bills, or not so controversial, depending on what you think about them. But one was 1782 and one was 1660. And these would have, I think that the fundamental reason that these bills, which were intended to address missing middle housing by mandating that you have duplexes or fourplexes within a certain amount of a certain distance of transit, or unlimited ADUs, accessory dwelling units, allowed throughout our communities. People choose their neighborhoods, and they love having accountability from their city government. So when the state will, Senator Kuderer said it just right, the tension between the state and the cities is real, and people have a relationship with their city government, and they trust their city government, and they trust the comprehensive planning process, and they want to be able to be involved in that. And if the state comes along and clumps something on the top of that, then, I think that on one hand, we are trying to do the right thing and make cities do the right thing. On the other hand, maybe we need a carrot rather than a stick approach. And so honoring the comprehensive plan, because if anyone's been involved in their planning commission or their community councils, if they've been involved in that work, they know that it's years and years of commitment. And cities are the ones who plan for where the sewer lines go and where the electricity lines go and all the things where the schools are going to be located, everything that supports the growth that we take. So I think I had a bill, I'll just plug my own bill, but it was House Bill 2020, and it was in partnership with a developer in our community who's been really successful at developing passive housing, which is environmentally neutral, and dense housing, but also beautiful housing. And that it would have mandated housing along, we made this huge commitment to sound transit, and we need to have a coordinated planning approach where we have transit stations and we do major developmental centers along those. And if it's senior development, if it's development for people with developmental disabilities, if it's sober housing, to create complete communities where you don't have to go out of your hometown to do the things that you need to do. That's what we want, and we need to work with our cities rather than against them. And so I have some I know Senator Kuderer and I have some plans, and Representative Slatter, to tackle this, because we think that our cities do a great job of this. And we just need to show other cities how it's done. But maybe we're biased. Maybe I'm biased.
I just want to say thank you so much for that explanation, Amy, or Representative Walen, because it's really important. I guess, I signed on to a couple of the bills that didn't quite make it across the finish line. And I just want to say that, in housing, as with gun legislation or with any other, we did get a lot of emails that were angry there as well. And I think that there's a lot of passion around this issue. And often many of us agree that there is a housing affordability problem, that there is a homelessness crisis, and that there is a real lack of actual affordable housing. That's not in disagreement by anybody who comes to this conversation, no matter which direction they come in. But when it comes to legislation, it seems that we need to have these conversations in real complex ways, and sort of supporting multiple bills to be able to have those conversations that go perhaps to Senator Kuderer's committee is really important, because then we get all the voices on the table and out there. And I'm a big advocate of seconding that motion for having that deep conversation, because we start to get really amazing ideas coming out of it. And so I would say thank you to Representative Walen and Senator Kuderer for the bills that you put forward, because I think you've advanced the conversation in many ways. And I really appreciate you mentioning the ADU question as well, Representative Walen, because I know that has come up quite a bit in a lot of the different emails that we've received. I look forward to working further with you on the issue.
Thank you all for tackling such an important topic. We have another question that came in from the viewers here, and it's what's your impression of the current needs of our education system in Washington? And we can start it out with Representative Slatter, if you'd like. Oh, and we have you muted, so.
Well, I know that some of the dollars for COVID relief have been set aside to provide funding for our school districts to be able to address needs that have come up through the COVID crisis. And that there's definitely, as students are going back to school, as schools are navigating transportation concerns, mental health concerns, emotional needs, and educational needs, there's going to be, we need to be able to support not only our teachers, but our families and our students in the space. And there was a lot of discussion about how best to do that. Our school districts were asking for certain dollars to be able to address some of the gaps in funding that they had to deal with, to be able to actually have in-person, in-school instruction. And we weren't able to actually meet the complete dollars that we wanted. And so we are going to continue fighting for more dollars and more supports. But we had some really powerful, budget supports and to manage, for example, providing money for school counselors and nurses. That was an increase that was really important. Being able to address some of the transportation needs that schools have, and some other funds that sort of help schools fill that gap. But there's still more work to be done. And I think that families are recovering and coming back. And in fact, I think the schools are actually leading the way in helping us, open back up in society and determine what it is that our needs are. But our students have, lost some time in person. They have been, incredibly resilient and challenged in this space. And I feel like we have to really stay open to what the needs are by the school districts and by families who are asking for us to pay attention to how their students can continue to be successful in school.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I think it was really critical that we increased funding for nurses and counselors in our schools, given the anxiety and the stress that parents and students alike went through, and teachers for that matter. But one of the things we also did that I think is how, what you want to see from your government when they're looking at an issue, that they're looking at it holistically. We lost a lot of nurses, and we already had a lack of mental health counselors to begin with. So we put money into educational programs to increase the availability of nursing and mental health counseling programs in our universities and colleges, so that we can actually start graduating more people in those areas to fill the need. And it's really, really critical that we do that. And on top of it, it's also, especially for mental health counselors and nurses, it's an issue of pay as well. And so I think addressing that has also been very, very critical. COVID was just extremely difficult for so many people. Not for everybody. I mean, it was a very unequal pandemic, if you will, in terms of how it impacted people. But families with students, it impacted greatly. And that's another reason why we also invested heavily in childcare and early learning programs to help those families with that expense. So we're still learning from our experience, and I'm sure that there'll be, as Representative Slatter said, there's going to be more policy coming out, but the main thing was to make sure that we had enrollment stabilization for our school districts, and that they didn't lose their school bus drivers and their cooks and their staff and all of that because of declining enrollment due to people choosing to take their kids out during a pandemic. And that's very understandable as well. So we're hoping we can get back to normal here. We're taking the first step with taking the mask off inside and outside, which is great. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to get back to what we call a normal type school setting so that our kids can get back to learning.
Thank you so much. And then we had one of the comments that popped up was asking to kind of unpack a little bit of the nurses topic there. And it also correlates with just the question at large, with what is the legislature doing to address the mental health crisis in schools? And we can start with Representative Slatter.
Do you want me to speak to the nursing shortage?
Yes, please.
Okay, and then we can go to mental health crisis. Okay, great.
That sounds great. Thanks.
There were several bills in the legislature. One was on staffing shortages, and that did not make it to the finish line. We know that hospitals are understaffed, and there are healthcare shortages in hospital settings, and particularly when it comes to nurses. Over the interim, as a workforce development chair, I partnered with Representative Cody, who's the healthcare chair, and so before the session started, we actually started a work group with nursing programs and with unions, as well as hospitals and educators and the Nursing Commission, and tried to figure out how we could address this shortage. Basically, the shortage has been happening for over 10 years, but it was accelerated in the crisis, and hospitals were telling us that they have 6,000 nurses that they are short in being able to have staffing for. And so we asked, well, where is that shortage occurring? And the nursing program says, well, we have a lot of students ready to sign up, but we can't get enough students into clinical placement, which is a hospital-based sort of set of placement numbers. And the hospital said, you know what, we're ready. We can help deliver up to 1,000 placements if you're willing to graduate these nurses into these educational spots. And so everybody worked together. It was really amazing to see all of these different stakeholders work together to solve a problem. And what we came up with was a bill. There were three solutions, but one of them was a bill that we passed this year on nurse educator workforce, because what the programs were saying is that if we want to deliver up to 1,000 placements, we still need more nurse educators. And because there's such a shortage of nurses, a lot of people don't stay to be faculty or to educate students in a college setting, and they can get a better wage by going out into the practice field. So what we did was we had a bill that would provide loan repayment for nurses who decided to stay and become educators, and healthcare loan repayment. And that was the program that we passed to be able to provide more education for nurses. And then we also funded more slots in schools so that more nurses could get educated and take advantage of clinical placements. And we also provided more funding for simulations. It's really fascinating if you go to a nursing program to see there's actual mannequins that actually will act like patients. And there's a technology to be able to train nurses on these electronic and mannequins and computer technology that helps them do simulation testing, essentially, and simulation training. And so we put more money into that for colleges as well. But ultimately, there's still a concern that there aren't enough nurses, and that nurses still are worried about their breaks and about their staffing shortages and how they have to operate in a hospital setting. And that conversation is still ongoing as well. So hopefully that's helpful in answering that question.
Absolutely. And did we have any other comments from the Senator or Representative Walen to expand on that?
I did have a note. I have all these notes, little tiny pieces of paper.
Of course.
$100 million in behavioral health workforce to address the behavioral health workforce shortage, and $1 billion in federal relief to stabilize school districts, hospitals, and the hospitality and convention center. You know, maybe we'll talk about budget. We had a surplus, and we spent a lot of it on I say spend, I mean invest in keeping the economy churning. And these are kind of, the schools have been just through the ringer and have been trying to adapt, and they still have facilities and everything that they have to pay for, even if they don't have kids in schools. So everybody has been challenged through the pandemic, every single sector of our society. And we have done what we could in the legislature, I think, to try to support them. So thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so moving from housing into transportation, one of the big questions that we were seeing was a lot of hype about the transportation package. And so folks are wanting to know, what are some of the key staples that you really liked we're really happy to see coming out of the transportation package? And if you could just kind of unpack that for our district and tell us a little bit more about that.
Do you want me to start? That be okay? Okay. So the transportation package there's a transportation budget. That's something we do every year that also funds our district projects. And then there's a transportation package. And we did both this year. So the budget is something that, we pass every year, and it's a certain amount of money, but it's not as much as a package. The package is $16 billion. And in some reports, it's 17 billion. So 16 to $17 billion over 16 years. And there's investments that, as you know, infrastructure can take a long time to build. So there's a long-term set of investments. For our district, we did have some pedestrian and bike safety projects that I think would be really interesting. One of the more exciting ones is the East Rail multi-use corridor through Bellevue. That's 42 miles that comes up from Renton all the way up to Snohomish County. And in Bellevue, there's a section that can allow people to ride their bikes or walk and be able to access so many different opportunities with this East Rail corridor. It's really exciting, and it connects neighborhoods, it connects us to workplaces, and I think people will very much enjoy it. And that was funded and then also the Mountains to Sound Greenway trail. There's a Bellevue Gap that was also funded. There's the sidewalks that were funded, as well as pedestrian crossings, 520 and 148th Northeast. Some money was given for that. And that's I don't know if you're familiar with that area. There's a bridge that basically is sort of old and narrow, and people walk across it with groceries, and it's really unsafe because there are cars that cross that bridge, and this would allow the start of building a kind of a pedestrian walkway there. It looks like Amy and Patty, did you want to say anything on that? Because I know that that's something you care about.
Well, I would just say a lot about that. Senator Kuderer, thank you so much.
Well, I'm more than happy to have helped with that. I've walked that bridge, so I know just how dangerous it is, and this is an excellent investment in our community. So,
yeah, it was really great. That's where the Senate and the House can help each other, by the way. Sometimes when the House doesn't have funding, the Senate can come and help, and Senator Kuderer absolutely did that. And so we have some flashing beacons and lights and things like that. One of the ones we're really proud of, I know I'm really proud of, because all of the city councils and the community members and businesses all came together to align to make sure that we would fund the north end of 405 in alignment with the Sound Transit construction of bus rapid transit. And that was not going to be on the table for 3 years. And if you can imagine people coming into Bellevue to work and not having access to the 405 bus rapid transit, but also the congestion along that roadway, it would have just been a nightmare for our district and for so many other districts up and down 405. Well, with all of the incredible advocacy and support from so many businesses, multiple letters, and a lot of focus on this issue and alignment, we actually did have money from the federal money, ARPA dollars, as well as some sales tax deferral to actually fully fund that project and make sure it can stay on time. And so we're really proud of that, I know. And there's other transportation projects in the 48th Legislative District, corridor improvements, I-90 Eastgate to SR 900, the South Downtown Access Study support for 405, a 405 Kirkland vicinity stage 2 widening, the Renton to Bellevue corridor widening. These are projects that were already in the works and are going to continue. So we do want multimodal and complete streets projects for Bellevue and Kirkland and Redmond. And these are already projects that had been in the works and can continue. And we're trying to also create more multimodal access for people. So King County Metro Transit diesel bus replacements, King County Metro bike share expansion for Kirkland, Bellevue, and Redmond. And we are going to try to preserve the Evergreen Point floating bridge. And there's also some Lake Washington congestion management. So lots of really good transportation investments that support active and pedestrian walkways, but also preserve and maintain what we already have so that it can stay working for us in the future.
A transportation package for all of us. Thank you so much for kind of unpacking that. Did we have any further comment on the transportation package before we move into? I think we have a couple more questions, maybe one or two that we can get to in the lightning round, and then outros.
I think it's a pretty big package. So if people are really curious about more details, we do have links that we can send you to be able to kind of peruse all of the different sections of it, because it's a lot, and 1 or 2 minutes is just not going to do it, I don't think.
Absolutely.
No gas tax and electric ferries. That's all.
That's right. Actually, good. Yes, thank you for that reminder. We didn't increase the gas tax to do this. Yeah.
So our next question, and what
one more thing. Sorry, Sam. But one more thing. We did leverage federal dollars as well. So these were one-time funds, but we're using them at the right time. So to get these projects done, and as Representative Slatter said, we wouldn't get the 405 corridor completed if we hadn't done that. So it's vitally important, especially with a minimum of 25,000 Amazon employees coming into Bellevue.
And it's important to also thank our federal partners as well in this space, the Congress folks who are helping us get these dollars.
Absolutely. That's incredible. Thank you so much. So our next, and what looks like it'll be our last question, because we're running a little tight on time, and I'm not sure if the system's going to boot us off. So we just have to be extra careful about that. This question was asked: do you support or oppose the purchase of King County's purchase of La Quinta Hotel in Kirkland?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. Our local leaders, first of all, I don't think that people really distinguish between city, county, school board. They think government, and the government, purchased this for permanent supportive housing. This was a decision by the regional homelessness task force. That's a sort of combination of suburban cities, Seattle and King County. I support this fully. I want to be clear. I support this fully because it's permanent supportive housing, and we need that in every community to have complete communities. We need that in every part of any area where we're experiencing folks in distress. And we have people in distress. We have people with mental health challenges and substance use disorder, untreated. Our healthcare system has not kept up with needs. And we have kids getting released out of foster care too early. We have a lot of upstream causes of homelessness and folks that need this is not a homeless shelter, but it is permanent supportive housing with services. The process that was used by King County and others to go about this purchase is problematic for our community. We didn't feel that we had enough notice. We didn't feel that we had enough input. But the core mission is the right one, and the core strategy is the correct one. I will say, you may not like this strategy, but what else have we done that has worked? So I'm glad something is being done. I am proud of our community for being welcoming to this facility, and I hope we will be welcoming, and I hope we continue to be welcoming. These are our neighbors and our community members, and the 48th stands for being a welcoming and inclusive bunch of cities and faith-based communities and all kinds of people who come together and welcome refugees, immigrants, and the most vulnerable among us. And that is the people who will be living at the La Quinta, our new neighbors.
Amazing. And then do we have any other comment on that?
Well, all I would say is I agree with Representative Walen. This approach is proven effective and is most likely to get people back on their feet and integrated back into community much faster than anything else we've tried.
I mean, I stand in solidarity with my colleagues, and I think that Representative Walen explained it really well in that there are two issues here. One is, how do we handle homelessness and permanent supportive housing? What are the best approaches? How do we bring community together to respond to this question? And I don't know that we've had the most effective way of doing that. And so I think we're hearing those concerns, and we feel you and see you in that space, because it's really important that we get that right, because this is not going to be something that goes away. This is a problem we have to address. And so we want to work with you to figure this out and to listen to what your concerns are. But I do think this is a real important crisis and need in our society, and how we address it is going to define us in many ways. And so I would ask that we have this conversation in ways that are agreeable, even if we disagree on certain aspects of it.
Thank you. Thank you all for such intentional and thoughtful remarks on that. So moving over to our final small and short segment, we'll start it out with Senator Kuderer for just sort of exit remarks, and then Senator Kuderer, Representative Walen, and then Representative Slatter, and then I'll be closing us out here in just a couple minutes.
Okay, well, I'll be brief then. I just want to thank everyone for spending some time with us tonight. It's really important that you decided to share your evening and listen to what we've been up to at the legislature. And you also got an idea that the work continues and the problems are serious, and in some cases they're intractable, but they're solvable. And it does take a lot of heads working together. It does take compromise. It does take time. But you have 3 very fully committed and dedicated legislators who want to do the best for our community. And if you have any questions at any time, need any information from me, any way I can be of assistance, please reach out to me. You can reach me at my email address, my legislative email address, or you can reach me at my legislative cell phone. So I look forward to continuing the conversation, and I hope to actually see you in person over the interim here. Thank you again for joining us.
Me next? Okay, here we go. I want to echo Senator Kuderer's offer of service. We each have a little bit of staff, and they just work really, really hard to support our offices and to help you. We have thousands of constituent emails, and we do casework, and the people in our offices are the front face of our work, and I just want to shout out to my legislative assistant, Michelle Hansman, who has spoken to many of you and tried to help and intervened and, sought help from federal offices. I want to say that, but I also want to say we have war in Europe for the first time in our lifetime. Inflation is at 7%. China is back into a lockdown, causing supply chain and a new stealth Omicron variant. The feds are going to raise interest rates. We have a lot of uncertainty in our world right now. We have not fully emerged from a pandemic. I want you to know that the 3 of us are there for you in any way that we can be. We are at your service. We work for you. And we may not always agree on every topic, but it's just time for us to come together as a community and do the hard things. And some of these topics are difficult, but we work for you, and thank you very much for the privilege of serving. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Walen and Senator Kuderer. Those are beautiful remarks, and I just want to, echo those, I guess, to say that we are here to serve you, and we also want to thank you because as a community, you have reached out to us and shared your thoughts, and you've given us your input. And I have to say, when I was voting on bills, and I know my colleagues do this as well, we check to see what it is our district is looking for and what they ask for. And we try really hard to better understand the policies that matter to you. And your engagement, not only in public testimony, but in emails and responses, and in just sometimes a quick phone call or a comment on, on a social media page, we appreciate you and appreciate everything you've done. We know everyone has gone through so much during this pandemic, with family, with health, with school, with work, with uncertainty. We're watching a country, in Ukraine, try to stand firm and fight and for self-determination. And it's inspired us all. And also, I just want to call out to the Ukrainian American community in our district and just say that we're with you and we stand in solidarity with you. And we recognize what you must be going through watching this across the ocean. And, and also just really appreciate our democracy and the fact that we have a government where we care about freedom and freedom of choice and voice. And I just really want to thank you all for being so resilient in our society and for working so hard for your neighbors and yourselves in this crisis. So we look forward to speaking with you and are here and ready to support you. Thank you so much for being here and engaging with us and listening to all this, all of this policy, and take good care. Be well.
Well, thank you so much from our awesome delegation in the 48th Legislative District. Our mission is always to bring our amazing elected leaders just a little bit closer to us, our community, and our constituents. And tonight, I think we did just that. As we sign off, I'll point out that in the comment section, we're plugging all of the websites. As we heard, all of our elected officials had referenced as well. We're going to put websites there. Please scroll down, sign up for the e-newsletters, get in contact, stay in contact with our offices here. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. With that, we'll close. Goodbye.